I would hope so. I mean, as I say, I think that there's the state of the discussion of education in this country, it seems to me, has stalled. And we talk a lot about accountability, we talk about measurement and evaluation, but we don't think about just fundamental issues: class size, working conditions, access to good books. I think that once our society gets serious about improving the working conditions for teachers and for educators, that we'll see more people want to move into that field. But with the current administration, its highest priority seems to be charter schools and attacking teachers unions. It's hard to see that many people would want to go into this field, which I think most of us agree is one of the most important that we have. And I think that young black men and black women are smart like the rest of the society. They see which way the winds are blowing. And probably a lot of talented people who might want to go into education are hesitant, waiting to see how things are going to shake out. Without wanting to suggest that the people who are made victims by the police and by disproportionately violent policing are somehow responsible for what happens to them, I would hope that enough young black men seeing what happens, seeing what is happening now, do feel inspired to want to teach and to think about what part can education play? What part can really exciting and inspiring young minds and imaginations play in bringing about the kinds of broad and sweeping changes that are needed to fundamentally address what's been going on for generations now? To some degree, I've experienced some of that. And I've been able to, I'm an educator, and I come ready to teach. And I've been able to overcome that. But I certainly have, one always experiences certain kinds of resistances and has to overcome expectations about what will be relevant to a black male professor, especially one who's in an African American studies department. I certainly think that part of the answer to your question is that there's a sort of a systematic disselection, let's say, a systematic way in which black people are made to feel that they don't have as much to contribute, that whatever knowledge they have somehow isn't universal enough. There are studies that will track the ways black men and women are called on or not, are treated as problem or not, are criminalized from a young age. And a former colleague, someone who just recently left, has done studies on specifically about the ways that interactions with the police discourage interaction with their government, from voting to receiving state aid. And so I have to assume that something similar happens in education, that the more you're either criminalized or made to feel that your contributions are unruly, the less likely you are to want to stay in the classroom and continue to work that hard within a system that doesn't seem to want you or to value you. I do want to just say that while it's true there aren't very many black male educators, and I haven't had very many black male teachers, the ones that I've had have gone a very long way towards making me feel that I belong, that I make sense. Just having one person even who looks and understands and even just sees you really makes a difference. So in high school, it was my band teacher who just had ways of making me feel that, I know things that Anthony will like, and that made a big difference. During my MFA program, it was one of my writing instructors who really understood the kinds of feedback and kind of confusion that was coming my way and helped me to navigate it, and likewise in graduate school. So while it can look daunting, it can look discouraging, people can say we just don't have the numbers, and that's true, and it is something to be addressed. It's also important that those who are there be encouraged and be recognized for all the extra work. Being an educator now, being a professional now, I understand all the extra work and just thinking and time that goes into being able to be sure to pull someone aside or not pull someone aside to make them feel that this is a place for you too. So I just wanted to add that. And some of that's geographic, and some of that is, I think, because of the historic effects of segregation and of kind of just people trying to really change class, the class status, the idea that you would pursue a PhD in literature just doesn't seem as practical as a law degree, a medical degree, a business degree, where there are a lot more Black men, I think, because those are traditionally paths to just greater financial security. Well, first, I have to say that this is one point I really agree with Malcolm X on. He, during the 60s, said Mississippi begins at the Canadian border. And I would add that's because Canada is Alabama. So I want to say that it's not just the Deep South that has to deal with these effects. I'm from the state of Michigan. And one of the things that you may or may not know is the waves of migration of people from rural to urban and from agricultural to industrial labor included poor whites from places like Tennessee and Kentucky. And so some of those effects of segregation very much were alive and present. In my own high school, there were many students who were comfortable wearing the Confederate battle flag on their t-shirt, and this was in the 90s. So that's kind of step one. Step two, it's a tricky question. And I want to answer it carefully. So I think that back to the first question, back to Kayla's question, there is a way that seeing more Black men succeeding and succeeding in certain fields does encourage people to feel that maybe there's a place for me. That said, the ways that diversity tends to happen, or the rhetoric of diversity, tends to think that any Black man is good. And I think that if we take someone like, say, David Clark, the now resigned sheriff of Milwaukee County, he would be a positive harm to students in places like Alabama or Michigan. I don't think we need that gentleman teaching much of anybody, a person who would let inmates in his prison die. And who wants to adorn himself with unearned medals or fake medals. So I want to just be careful about that. It's not just representation, but we would want people who, and this is something that W.E.B. Du Bois would say, and I'm going to paraphrase him, people who both have the training and who really understand and care about their students, and not just their Black students, but really care about all of their students and aren't just wanting to take a position of, as Clark often does, of kind of victim blaming and saying, oh, you didn't pass algebra? Well, it's because you didn't study. Well, there's certainly other factors for not passing algebra. There are other factors for not being able to pick out all 9 parts of speech, or 8, depending on who's arguing. And you would want educators of any race who identify that and who can think about that. And you would want not just the educators, but the administrators, the school board, the state and local governments to say, this is a crisis. And we need to approach it with the seriousness that entails and hire and retain and nurture the educators who are going to uplift all of the students. Whether that would then solve problems of segregation and racism, I'm skeptical, because at Cornell and at the University of Michigan, as I follow the news, and at other schools, we continue to hear about strife. We continue to hear about neo-Nazis and people even just up the road at the University of Hartford. I don't know if you all heard the story where one girl terrorized a roommate she called Jamaican Barbie, and really contaminated her toothbrush and eating utensils, and went out of her way to make this young woman's experience miserable. And that's a person was on her way to a college education before she got expelled, and justly so. So I think that there's the undoing a long legacy and complicated legacy of racial segregation will need more than just education. But I do think that education can be an important part of that.